I think we got 16 raindrops tonight. That's the most rain we've gotten in a while.
It's true.
My yard could use it.
I was out on the Sudbury River a few days ago, and I have never seen it that low at this time of year.
Yeah, you know, I've been thinking this is kind of like, was it 5 years ago that we had that bad drought? I had never seen anything as low as it was back then.
All right, Mike. I think, who's this iPad guest? It might be Anika. I'm gonna let iPad guest in. See who it is.
Oh, there's Nika. Chuck.
So who's the iPad guest?
Hey, Nika.
Hello.
All right, Chuck. I think that's.
Do we have all our members? And Jamie?
What about Kay Rhodes? Is she coming tonight?
I didn't see an email from her. She usually sends something if she's not able to make it. 7:02. If she gets in, we'll continue. So it's 7 o'clock, July 8th, 2020. We'll get the Conservation Committee meeting going. We have a decent amount on the agenda today. Before we begin, Chuck will kind of go through some of the ground rules associated with the Zoom meeting. Most of the members on the commission, you guys know the drill. We've been through a few of these already. But anybody that's in the public, you know, certainly we want to, it takes a little bit of extra effort doing the Zoom meetings and getting public comment. What we do want to stress is all the documents for today's meeting are on the Conservation Division webpage. If you feel like there wasn't an opportunity to get your any sort of public comment in, please feel free to email the Conservation Division as well with your comments. What we've been doing is anything that's open newly tonight has not been closed, and when we look at it at the next meeting, we'll evaluate if any additional comments have come in. With that, before we had Chuck do his little speech, I'll just introduce the commission. Michael Flynn, Chair. Nika.
Nika Scanlon, Vice Chair.
Martha.
Martha Moore, member.
Dave.
David Panett.
Carl.
Carl Ciccone, member.
John.
John Sullivan, member.
Scott.
Keith, I think, member.
And Nicola.
Nicola Meserve, associate member.
All right, guys, that's the, you notice I'll do it one more time, but that's going to be the order in which we do voting tonight as well. So if you recall who's next. Chuck, with that, do you have our usual Zoom?
Sure, I can start in on that. Hello, everyone. This is Chuck Barone, the Reading Conservation Administrator, consistent with the governor's orders suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and allowing us to adhere to social distancing requirements during COVID-19 crisis. The Town of Reading's Conservation Commission meeting is being held virtually via Zoom meeting, audio and video. Participation of the Conservation Commission, the applicants and the representatives and the public. During the meeting, myself or the Conservation Chair will unmute commissioners, applicants, and representatives, and members of the public individually as needed. During the conservation meeting, the chair and the administrator will be the only ones permitted to share video These controls are in place to ensure tonight's meeting will be safe and effective at all times. I would like well, we already confirmed the members, but I'd like to confirm the members. We've done that. So thank you, everyone. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. As the meeting facilitator, I will be the only one participating that can share the screen. Please be aware that other folks may be able to see you. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the computer. Before we get started tonight's agenda, I'm going to cover some ground rules for an effective and clear conduct in our business to ensure that we have accurate meeting minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair or the conservation administrator yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. After the commissioners make remarks, please have been addressed by the applicant, the chair, or the conservation administrator will afford the comments as follows. The chair or the conservation administrator will ask for members of the public who wish to speak to identify themselves. Once the chair has a list of names of the public, the chair will call on each one of them and afford them 4 minutes to comment. The applicant may be requested to respond by the chair or the conservation administrator. After the public comments, the chair or the conservation administrator will once again go down the list of commissioners, inviting each one of them to provide further comments, questions, or motions. Please hold off until your name is called. Finally, each vote taken during this meeting will be conducted in a roll call vote. For anyone who is speaking tonight's meeting, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. You can also turn off the video on your device if you prefer. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. Okay, Mr. Chair.
All right. Just to add to that, thank you, Chuck. I've been saying this the last few, but there's certainly extra effort that goes to getting these meetings together. So really thank Chuck for making these run as smoothly as they can. You know, in addition to what Chuck said, you know, one feature that we've been using, if you are muted and are trying to get attention, is there's the raise hand feature. That helps get Chuck or my attention if you're looking to speak. So with that, we'll get moving on the first item on the agenda. This is the Castine Field and Riverfront Restoration east of John Carver Road. So Jamie Mon is here tonight. He's going to present essentially what's out there and a little bit of information associated with the Castine Field and what we've got. So Jamie, well, before we get this, Chuck, maybe you could kind of give us, I have a little bit more background on this, but if you could give us a little bit of like, how we got here and why Jamie's here.
Recording?
Okay, thank you. So there's a Birch Meadow master plan, and I had gone to a meeting and I saw that on this conceptual plan that they had some ideas for Castine Field. And I let everyone know at the meeting that I had been hearing about Castine Field since I arrived here in Reading, and that was a protected area and it met the criteria to be a wetland and a resource area. And that former chair and longtime member of the commission, Jamie Mon, had done some work on that property, and that what I saw on the plans, I was surprised at, and I wanted everyone to know that further discussion would need to take place. In addition to the Castine Field area, there was a area just off John Carver Road that was brought to my attention back in 2011 that it's a riverfront area that was required to become a natural riverfront area. and that it was not supposed to be mowed. And there were many requests during 2011 and 12 and 13 to mow that area. And I got specific instructions from the Conservation Commission that shouldn't happen because some agreements were made with the DPW department based on the work that was done in the Birch Meadow area. So after the meeting, I felt like I needed to talk to Jamie, who, like I said, has done a lot of work on this area, and he wanted to speak to the commission tonight. So that's really the run-up to why Jamie's here, and he's going to talk about Castine Field, the resource area, the riverfront restoration area, and to bring the commissioners up to date. So, Chair, and through you to Jamie, would you like to take it from here?
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I'll just let you go. Jamie, you're familiar with the process, so you know the drill. Did we lose him?
I think Jamie is joining again right now. I'll get him.
Yeah.
You see him, Mike?
Yeah. Oh, it says joining.
Okay.
Should be quick.
Yeah, sound connected.
Okay, Jamie.
Jamie, I don't think your sound is connected yet.
Those are the places that they stay open. Backpedaling as opposed to moving forward.
Anything now, Jamie?
Everybody's doing their own. And that also goes to the Commander-in-Chief should have made that
So
a
I'm
U.S.
going to wait for Jamie to connect. I'm going
Yeah, we'll give
to.
him a second to connect to audio again.
Right, what's going to happen to you is going to kill you. Yeah, they're all just fucking wrong.
Somebody's got background noise going on.
Shirt, no shoes, no shirt. Shirt, no mask.
Yeah, I know I hear that, but I don't hear. I don't see who it is.
All right. Can give Jamie another minute here. If not, Chuck, we could always move on. It's
Yeah, when he gets
7:15
connected,
already, anyways.
start with because I noticed that Leah Basbane's here, and she's actually conducting another meeting tonight, so she might be under some restrictions for her time.
Thanks, Chuck.
Oh, we got Jamie right here.
Hey, Jamie.
I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened. My computer just shut off, and I got that ugly blue screen. But anyway, I apologize. I don't want to take things out of order, and I can wait whenever it's convenient.
Jamie, we got you back. Why don't we have you? Well, we Chuck set you up about why you're here. Why don't we go ahead and continue?
Okay, if you can hear me all right.
Yeah, we can hear you
Yep.
fine now.
Chuck, thank you for inviting me. You were very generous to give me 15 minutes, but I'll try and do it in a lot less than that and leave time for questions. And I was asked to talk a little bit about Castine Field and Birch Meadow recreational area, which Chuck has just put up an aerial photo. And you can see the Birch Meadow complex with the lacrosse synthetic field on the right, and all the way to the other side, Castine Field, which is in that large curve in Birch Meadow Drive. And I'll start off by saying that our Birch Meadow complex is a huge resource for the town of Reading. The high school, Birch Meadow, elementary school, Coolidge Middle School, the YMCA all surround and make maximum use of this facility. And it's a great resource for the town from a recreational standpoint, both active and passive. It's also a special and amazing natural resource because before we converted it to recreation in schools, most of it was in fact wetlands and stream channel. There's still a remnant of the original wetland resource on that entire complex, and that's defined primarily by Castine Field. Castine Field is an area used for soccer in the summer when it's dry enough, and it's also flooded mechanically because we have gates on the Aubergina River next to Castine Field in the winter and frozen for ice skating. There are two things that I want to highlight. First, back in 2009, we took about 2 years and did a comprehensive master plan for Birch Meadow. And as you might expect, it was represented by all the stakeholders, and the active recreation stakeholders were a big part of the exercise, as was the school committee and the YMCA. That subcommittee or ad hoc committee developing that plan wanted to maximize the recreation, but they also understood that it was a natural resource. I was on that commission because we wanted the Conservation Commission represented because of the natural resource in the area. And as part of that process, we, the Conservation Commission, brought to that ad hoc committee developing the master plan two important pieces of information. One, that Castine Field was in fact a jurisdictional wetland. We had made that determination on numerous occasions, including the renovation of the high school, as well as at other times. And it qualified as a jurisdictional resource for all the criteria that are specified in both the Reading bylaws and the state wetland laws. Groundwater is at the surface much of the year, and certainly it is inundated. The second is that they are wetland, obligatory wetland plants throughout Castine Field. You can certainly see in the unmowed areas the cattails and other characteristic wetland species, but also even in the mowed field. If you go out there and look, which we did at the time, and look closely, you will see small sprouts for obligatory wetland species in the middle of the field. Over time, the Conservation Commission and the Recreation Commission and DPW had more or less struck a deal. And since it had been used for a recreation area for so long, we struck the deal, as we do in many as we did at the time in many private properties. Since it had been cut and mowed and manicured, we would allow that to continue in the active play area. However, the agreement was that outside of the active play area, particularly along the edges where there were cattails, it would not be mowed but left natural. We did again compromise and allow the cutting of those cattail once a year at the end of the year, because DPW and Rec Department were concerned there might be ticks in the vegetation. But anyway, it was an agreement that worked pretty well. And when we developed the master plan, since I was on the ad hoc committee as well as on the Conservation Commission, I told them that there was a resource, and we brought that to the Conservation Commission, which voted unanimously at the time, and I know Anika was on at the time, and Michael might have been also, and I know Chuck was around, but we voted unanimously that that was a resource, a jurisdictional resource, and needed to be protected as part of the master plan. And sure enough, when the master plan, we made a presentation to the ad hoc committee, convinced them, and they were cooperative. And if you look at that 09 master plan, you'll see there's no additional activity, filling, or modification of Castine Field or the adjacent wetlands in acknowledgement of that. The other aspect of that complex is they're just below Castine Field on the aerial photo, which is on the other side of the river from right there where Chuck's Hand is. And that area was originally paved back in pre-2005. As the renovation of the high school proceeded, they were going to take some of the riverfront area as part of their football field. And in compensation for paving part of that resource area as part of the football field, they took this area where Chuck's Hand is that was paved. We removed the pavement and left originally natural vegetation as compensation for the lost riverfront. DPW to continue to cut that, and the last time I went by they were still cutting it, and we asked them not to cut it but let it grow up in natural vegetation. That never was 100% successful, but at least it was left unpaved and unused and still provided habitat, provided infiltration. The final thing I want to say is that, or the next to the final thing, is that I've been very concerned about Castine Field over the years. I see it as exhibiting all the important resource criteria. Just as a little personal note, there are tadpoles in that wetland area around Castine Field almost every spring. I took my daughter, who's now 37, out there to catch tadpoles when she was 4 or 5. And then this spring, I took my granddaughter, who's now 4 years old, and we caught tadpoles out there. Also, as you go by, you'll see a lot of bird activity, particularly red-winged blackbirds in that area. So it's a wildlife habitat. Also, those cattails do an amazing job of soaking up the water and storing floodwaters. So it's and improving the quality and removing the nutrients before they get in the Arizona River. So it's important from that standpoint, and also flood control. That river floods. The town has spent a lot of money on flood control studies for that river. If that Castine Field is taken out of that floodplain, it will exacerbate the downstream flooding. Now, the final thing I want to say is that I understand that over the last year or two, the Birch Meadow Master Plan has been going through a revision. At first, there was a subcommittee to do that. That was disbanded in January, and a working committee comprised, I think, exclusively of town staff is reworking that, and we've hired a consultant to help with that master plan. And my concern is that, from what I hear, and I'm not on that working group, but from what I hear in my contact with various members of the select board, is that the current effort has not taken into account the previous master plan, the extensive and expensive survey we did to find out what the needs were, and also, to the best of my understanding, has not acknowledged that Castine Field is a jurisdictional wetland and cannot be filled without compliance with the Reddington bylaws and the Wetland Act. So I think that the Conservation Commission should be aware of that and should be alert to the fact that that resource might be at risk. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chuck and Michael and see if there are any questions or you have any other thoughts.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. Certainly helpful, you know, for what it's worth. But I'll say, so I wasn't on the commission when the Castine Field items came through. I was a few years ago when I think it was Morton Field and maybe some other fields had some lighting added. And I actually recall that you going through this a little bit more even back then about what the agreement was and you know, kind of the history behind this. So back then, I remember you telling basically what you've said here, and not quite understanding it all to the same degree because, you know, it was just kind of in passing of that project. But certainly seeing this and particularly as it relates to any master plan going forward, I want to. It's good to make sure the commission's aware. I'm glad that you were able to get kind of your history and background there. I had a quick question in regards to, and this is my recollection from the Morton Field project. So this is the Aberjona that comes through this. Is that correct? This is riverfront?
That is correct, and it seems like a simple question. That Aberjona is a river, and when the high school was renovated in the early 2000s, it was designated a river, and all that area was riverfront. Since then, there's been some modifications and recalculations, and at times well, for some applications, Aberjona has been designated river and riverfront only from Willow Street downstream. So there's a bit of a complication, but when that area on the other side of Castine Field was designated to replace infringement on riverfront, it was designated riverfront. Mm-hmm. So that's a long answer to a simple question. So at one time it was riverfront, but now it's not. If somebody wanted to contend it, they probably could go back and reclassify it as riverfront because things change and there's more rain.
Okay. And I kind of remember some confusion on that when the Morton Field project came up because it goes into a closed channel at one point as it goes through the field. And I think some of the conversation was more focused towards like the Imagination Station area and how it opens back up and what all that looks like on that end. But
right, when we did the high school, it was riverfront there at Imagination Station, and it was riverfront on 100 feet on each side when it went underground. Then it wasn't riverfront when it was underground, but then when it resurfaced by Castine Field, it became magically riverfront again.
Okay. So I'll just go to any other members on the commission. Does anybody have any other questions? Anika, I know you were around when this originally came up. I don't know if you have any other thoughts or questions as well.
Yeah, thank you. I was about to raise my hand. Jamie, thank you for coming back and doing such a concise summary of what has been a complex kind of area and brought up in a lot of town discussions. So I understand from this meeting that there is currently a Birch Meadow Master Plan Working Committee. And I just want to ask, has conservation been asked to provide any input on that?
So I am part of the staff that is on the working group, but I've been to one meeting, and at that meeting there was already a conceptual plan, and that's when I raised my hand and I said, we're going to have to review this area for Castine Fields, and I did that, in the introduction with Jamie, what had happened. But yeah, the conservation office is part of that working group. But my first meeting to be on was only a couple weeks back. So it seems like Jamie talked about some other meetings and bringing it forward, and somehow there was a conceptual plan made, which I knew nothing about.
So I guess one of my follow-up questions is, would it be useful to convey to this working committee the findings that Jamie summarized in sort of a brief memo as a just memo to the working committee, basically saying, this is what we understand about this area. Please be advised.
So Jamie's memos and the 2009 master plan and some of my own comments were sent to the committee. And I think that they're reviewing those, and I haven't heard from them, but you know, I know that the recreation department has received them. So, and you know, I would expect to be part of the upcoming plan, and I would expect with the comments made in the Conservation Commission backing the fact that this is, I don't know if anyone has taken the time to go out there. I did send out this information in the packet, but to look at this area in person. And like Jamie said, you know, out of the 3 criteria needed, 9 months out of the year, you're going to see 2 of those, you know, just standing there looking right back at you. So that compromise that happened where, you know, it's needed field space and it's used when it's dry. I can understand how there was a hope that that could be turned into year-round field space, but it's going to be hard to eliminate that wetland because I think they'll definitely go with the threshold and it'll be hard to meet. You know, it'll be hard to meet the standards.
And Anika, just to add to that, just from my understanding of it too, and this has been great, and this is exactly why we wanted Jamie here. Is, you know, Chuck had attended that meeting. I think there was some discussion with the select board that Jamie had mentioned, and ultimately what we want to make sure, you know, this, as soon as it got brought up about Castine Field, we knew there was a history associated with agreements that, you know, you use the field, you not use the field, and you know, at this point, I think just providing that information, just that you know, Chuck has been able to provide that information to the working group right now that Jamie had and collected, I think is valuable and hopefully gets us going in the right direction. I think if it seems like, you know, things aren't tracking, I think at that point it may be valuable for the commission to then follow up with a memo just supporting everything that has already been provided to them. You know, this is how we understand the area, and that's what our hope is. But I think right now the working group, at least my understanding of it, has received a lot more information about Castine Field and the history behind it and what's there. It's definitely something that I wasn't fully familiar with. So,
if I could just add to that, if you don't mind, I agree with everything you said. You said, Michael and Anika. I think it's great that Chuck's on that working group, but I do think that the Conservation Commission in an official position would back up what Chuck has to say, because Chuck is town staff and he's working with other town staff, and it's up to Chuck to do the hard work. It's up to the commission, and I'm not telling you your job, believe me, but it's the commission's charter is to oversee the resources of the town. So it's really the commission that should be sending that memo so that Chuck can show that working group that he has the support of the commission.
Well,
I agree, Jamie.
Yeah, Jamie, you know, I think it's a good point, and ultimately, I definitely value your opinion as someone that was been involved in these things in the past, and just in general been involved in with the commission. So, Martha,
I just want to add that the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Group, we talked a lot about flooding risk, and I know that whole Birch Meadow area is an area that does flood. And so I think what Jamie pointed out about Castine Field being a really good water catchment area for flooding is important. They don't want to sacrifice that and then find that the football field and the soccer field that they put all the artificial turf on end up in standing water.
Good. Yeah, that's a good point, Martha. I do recall that being talked about, and I think that was one of the points when I first heard that there was this reworking to the master plan going on. Are there any other questions for Jamie? Go ahead, Anika.
Thanks. I guess to Jamie's point, Mike, I don't know if you would be think it appropriate to draft some sort of letter, and we could review it at the next meeting.
I do, Anika. I think that was going to be. I think what I see as one of the conclusions from this is, where do we go from here? I think that the right move, to Jamie's point, I think is to make sure Chuck has the support and the people on the working committee know that the commission, what the commission thinks about this area and their understanding of the history of casting fields. So what I'll do is I can put together a draft of a memo that's saying that this is what we understand and what we support, and I'll send it around to the group so we can make sure everybody's on the same page before the next meeting.
Just one other final thing, if I might. I've been talking to some of TAN leadership, and they have expressed some concern also, and expressed some interest in having explained to this working group the history as I just explained to this group, and asked if I would be interested in doing that. And I would be, but I would not want to go before that working group without at least a representative from the Conservation Commission attending with me. So if that happens, I'll let you know.
I'd be happy to
Yeah,
go.
that'd be great. Appreciate that, Jamie and Anika.
I'll holler across the street if I hear Anika.
Just put up a flag.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, Anika lives right across the street from me.
All right. I guess, is there anything else? Chuck, do you have anything else or need anything else on this? I think we have a path forward, and
I would just ask Jamie if he has any more requests from the Conservation Commission at this time concerning Castine Field.
And no request. I just am so happy to see such a full Conservation Commission. Everybody so engaged. It's heartwarming.
All right,
Thanks,
Jamie.
Jamie.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for your input, Jamie.
Thank you. I'd love to
Before
stay
we,
for the
move
rest
on to
of
what
it,
I would
but you.
do-
I'd love to stay for the rest of the meeting, but you have everything in hand. Let me know if I can do anything else. Good evening.
Jamie, we really appreciate it. Before we move on, I'll just open it up. If there's anybody that has anybody in the public has comments, feel free to raise your hand in the meeting. I'm seeing none. Just a reminder, if you do have comments, feel free to, and you weren't able to reach out, feel free to send an email to the Conservation Division through the Reading.gov website.
Mike, David Pinette, I do have a question for Jamie before he goes off. If he can just illuminate for us those people that were on the select board or on the town leadership that he alluded to, that he had spoken with about Castine, who those people were.
Yeah, I spoke to a couple people in the rec committee, and a couple people on the select board, just to bring them up to date.
Okay. Were they aware of any issues or problems or what's going on as far as the plan moving forward?
There was some awareness, not as much as I would hope, but there was some awareness. One concern that was raised apparently at TAN meeting, not apparently, at TAN meeting, we had allocated funds to do some survey of wetlands on TAN property. The main piece was that big piece that TAN purchased over there behind the Burbank arena, because we wanted to know what wetlands were on there, so we knew what development possibilities were possible. But that, because of the COVID-19 budget constraints, that money has been frozen and won't be used. So that money that was going to be used to delineate some of those wetlands by an outside consultant is no longer available.
So at this point, it didn't seem like there was already something that was already happening, that had already moved forward for, without looking back with the Conservation Commission.
There wasn't a real awareness of that. There was a subcommittee, and Chuck helped me out, or an ad hoc committee comprised of mainly Recreation Commission, but that was disbanded in January, and then this working group was reassembled. Does that sound right to you, Chuck?
I'm actually, the first time I heard about this was at a staff meeting, and it was around in January, and Jenna, who is the recreation administrator, said that there was going to be staff involvement, and then CV-19 hit, and it did get a little bit messed up. And like I said, the next thing I knew, David, there was this meeting, and the plan had already been at this level. So that plan is a conceptual plan. It might be 40% of what they want. And but I think that somehow there was some additional meetings that I wasn't able to attend, or I wasn't asked to attend, because I know they talked about in a memo I got, there was a stakeholder meeting, and there was a meeting, I believe, with other staff, or maybe just the town engineer.
Because I remember something being
is there a way?
down at, what was it, Pinehurst? What's the park that's down off of Walnut Street? Walnut and South?
Yeah, I think it's
Sturgis Park?
Sturgis, yes, yeah.
I remember there was something that was going on with that, and then that was dropped in the winter.
Yeah, that didn't get to my desk. The only thing I remember is Bob Hayes wanted to redo the park with private funds, and needed the commission to approve some of the work, and we needed to define where the riverfront was for him and understand what part was in the riverfront, what part was just in, BVW.
Yeah.
So Bob Hayes, and if you remember that wasn't so long ago. That was the last time I remember talking about Sturgis.
Yeah. So that's not all wrapped up with this Castine thing, or is it all the same part and parcel with the recreation?
Well, Castine Field is going through a update of their master plan, and it was updated in 2009. It was updated in 2011, and now it's being updated again, and which is pretty typical to have an updated master plan if you want to keep a facility moving forward. But that's what I know about it, and that's just from checking into things.
David, just in response to your question, one concern that I remembered that the town leadership expressed, what they don't want to happen is spend all this money on the master plan, and then when they go for the permits to implement the master plan, they can't get the permits, so they will have wasted that money on the master plan.
Sure.
That was a concern they had, and I think a legitimate concern.
Certainly very valid. That's why it's important to have people that know about conservation on that ad hoc committee.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounded like the ad hoc committee was recreation. I guess from the standpoint of, Chuck, do you feel like if stakeholders were, you were engaged as part of a staff meeting, but do you feel like if stakeholders were engaged again, I mean, this can all be part of our memo, that we want to make sure that we are engaged as stakeholders if a stakeholder meeting is held, or that it's clear that the commission is a stakeholder in this. But yeah, the stakeholder meeting was just a smaller, I don't know if there's any background on what you meant by stakeholder.
I think you are a stakeholder, and I think that you're the one stakeholder that was missing at the meeting because the resource area wasn't represented in this plan.
Michael, I did review the minutes from these meetings. I was able to get hold of those, and they did interviews of stakeholders, and they probably had 10 stakeholders that they interviewed and had a list of questions, and about 8 or 9 of those 10 or 7 or 8 were various baseball and softball organizations, and there was a lacrosse organization, and there was no wetland or natural resource advocacy stakeholder represented in these interviews, which got my attention.
Okay, that's good to know as well, Jamie, because I think that's even more reason to make sure we have this memo represent that. We'd like to, not only this is what we understand, but we'd like to make sure we're a stakeholder moving forward. Okay.
Sure. And it was brought to my attention that at the meeting that I went to for this master plan, that the consultant did not have a wetland staff person, or even have an outside wetland consultant review the Castine area, or the Abidjona area, or the Imagination Station area, or the area near Morton Field. So this area, which to me struck me as quite unusual, since this is a shared complex. It's shared with multi-use complex, but it's shared with multiple resource areas. We have riverfront, we have just regular streams, BVW, 100-foot wetlands, and again some compromises and some agreements, which all needed to be brought forward before each committee and each committee meeting.
Okay. Are there any other items? Yeah, none. All right, Jamie, again, we really appreciate you coming in and doing the research and digging up what you were able to. It's very helpful.
Happy to do it. Let me know if there's anything else I can do moving forward, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
All right. And at least 7:15, we'll move on to our second item on the agenda. This is 15 B Street violation, the filling of a wetland area, DeRusso. At the last meeting, Leah was able to give a summary of what's been happening since the filling had taken place, and the work that had been performed to remove the soil. We were able to see some pictures, but I think there was still planting to be completed. Chuck, is there anything, do you want to say anything before we turn it over to Leah?
Sure, let me just run through what I have.
Yeah.
To the site.
So you have some pictures to show us.
Are you seeing these pictures? Just give me a yes or no. Pictures, sure. So I went to the site a couple times last week and once this week, and I saw the plants once on the driveway, and I saw the plants being, that after they were planted. So they all looked pretty good. I didn't see any issues with the planting, the amount of plants, and it looked like the homeowner, Derek DeRusso, had a hose out there, and he had been watering them, daily at least. So, it was it was good. It was good to see that this had finally, finally got planted and taken care of. I think that it looks nice, and it has a chance to grow in with this amount of plants and with the volunteer vegetation coming in. So I think Leah had, if you can see this is the write-up I got from Leah Basbane, and she put this together on July 7th, and it says in this memo that 15B Street has nearly been completed. I did want to ask what else needs to be done, because it looked like all the plant was done, all the dirt was pulled back. We have a list of plants, we have a quantity. I did ask her to have a fall survivability report to the commission, and then one in the springtime. And when she's reviewing the project with the commission, she can let us know what the homeowner, Mr. DeRusso, if he hired her to do that, or if that's something that still needs to be worked on. So with that, Chair, you can turn that over to the commission.
Sorry. Chuck, before we turn it over, do we have this memo? I don't know that
Can you see the screen?
seen this, but yeah. Was this sent to the commission?
No, I just received this yesterday or today. It did not go to the commission. I might have just got it.
Leah, I guess just in line with that, is there a, he says nearly completed. Is there anything else that you see needs to be done out there?
No, so actually that nearly is a typo. I had started writing this report before it was fully completed, because when I started writing this on Monday, still the topsoil needed to be spread in that little circle area. So in the event that Mr. DeRusso was not able to spread that, I was preparing a report saying that, and apparently I just failed to delete that one word. So he had injured himself last week and had been in the hospital for a little bit. So, and I know his back is very bad and his hip, and he's sort of physically a mess. So I didn't know if he was going to actually be able to complete that area, but he did. He managed to do it, and so I was able to go back and the area and spread the straw mulch on top of it. So that's just, I can revise that and remove that word, but because everything has been done at this point. So
there's an area between the planting and the driveway that has been put down. Has that been seeded? Is it the plan for that to be grass?
It's been seeded. The entire area has been seeded with a conservation native seed mix from New England wetland plants. Okay. You can see it's just starting to drain. You can see a little bit of green fuzz coming in there. So the seed is starting.
So all the way up to the rocks, it's got the wetland mix?
Yeah, it's not a wetland mix. It's a conservation seed mix. There are a few wetland species in it, and some facultative and some upland. It's got a good mix of stuff that's in there that'll grow under different conditions.
All right.
So when I looked at it and then I read the memo, I was that's why I wanted to ask a question. That's why I set it up that way, because in my opinion, we have 2 reports left, and just these things and the plants. After we get the 2 reports, we need to know that this has survived, through the winter, and anything that dies off would be replaced. But that's where we are. And so I was surprised that it said nearly completed. I do.
My poor typing skills. I apologize for that.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to get back to you with that, so I had to hear it at the meeting. So I apologize. I do want to bring to the commission's attention also that Mr. DeRusso is, he's a very proud man, and that he wants this area to remain nice. And he doesn't want his neighbors to, no longer are they allowed to come through this gate area right here. And he's put up a concrete, it's actually like a pier, like a foundation pier precast. And he's strung a chain across it, but he has no trespassing signs. And I think when we finish this, this process, I think that this is not going to be a dumping area for everyone on B Street and Libby Ave anymore, and that at least one of these things is going to come off that list of chronic violations.
The other thing he was
Good.
concerned
And I
about.
know that was one of his
apparently
concerns
is
when
the,
I went out there. Go ahead, Leah.
I'm sorry, the electric company or whoever is maintaining the utility lines, when they've been cutting trees, have been dumping them along. A lot of those old logs that are there that are decomposing now, but those have been placed there apparently by the utility company that's been coming in to clear the lines. So, just to be apprised of that.
Needs a GoPro camera out there.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that. I heard that story, but I don't know.
I don't know if that's, but that was relayed to me, so I have no.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah. So it's not our town, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
But it could be somebody in a truck that looks like a utility truck.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Okay.
okay.
So.
Any other questions from? Oh, go ahead, Leah.
No, so you want, is there a deadline by which you want the report in the fall and spring submitted, like, you know, October 30th or May 15th or something?
Has Mr. DeRusso agreed to the report? To both of these?
Yeah, I've told him that this was going to be anticipated and he was, whatever it takes.
So you already have an agreement to
Yes.
include 2 reports in this process. So we would like to have the report during our November meetings, but you can write it up whenever, and I already went down the criteria that we want in an email. But if we could get it at least by we usually have just one meeting in November, but you know, maybe end of October, the first meeting in November would be great.
Okay.
And then in the spring, May, June?
I think May or the first meeting in June, I think, is a good time frame.
Yeah, no later than the first meeting in June.
Right.
So November 1st and June 1st, I'll just.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great. All right, so bring to the commission's attention that we have an enforcement order on this property still. The enforcement order was never updated. I was never requested by the commission to update that. It only asked that Mr. DeRusso come to the meeting or hire a consultant that would attend the meetings so we could understand what's going out there and coming up with a plan. That part of the, well, that's what the enforcement order says, and that it has been completed.
Yeah, so I guess what I would bring to the rest of the commission is, I mean, at this point, it seems like we could close that enforcement order. We've got 2 survivability reports that need to be prepared. And I know that requires work, but he has the contracted to do that. I think if something went awry or didn't look right, there's always the ability to put enforcement back on. But you know, I think we've done it in the past similarly where we've released, at this point when it's just the survivability, we've been able to release it, but I'm open to other thoughts from the commission. Go ahead, Nika.
Thank you, Mike. I just want to jump in. You know, in essence, you know, a lot of the restoration has begun. We do have that survivability piece, and you're right. We do have the additional follow-up reportings. I just want to ask, is there any harm in keeping the enforcement order open and updated until this is completely finished? Like, for example, in that picture right there, I see some staked hay bales. So, you know, at what point is the resident going to be told to take those up? You know what I mean? Like, is that going to be this fall? Is that going to be next spring? You know, so there's a little bit of outstanding issues. I guess I just want to ask, what's the harm in keeping it in place but updated?
So my only thought is, and this ties into our next project, is that it's not the Mr. forgetting his name, the resident team, it's not necessarily his property. and this is tied to the Zero Haverhill Street project. I don't know if that, and having an enforcement order complicates issues with just the fact that it's not his property. And so, to me, it seems like if there's a comfort that there, you know, I think you bring up a great point with the hay bales, but I guess what I wanted to bring up to the commission is if I've seen us do something similar in the past, and if there's a comfort with, look, it's on its way, the work, you know, we'll be receiving these survivability reports. It does put the onus on the commission to follow up, right, to make sure that we get those survivability reports, but where otherwise it was on him to have the burden to prove that it's okay. But, you know, and I think in cases like this where, you know, we're seeing an improvement, we're seeing the restoration begin, I think this is a time when it's warranted to potentially do that.
Okay. I understand the complicated issue at this point. You know, I can agree to that simply on the basis that excavation was undertaken, so the filling was remedied and plantings have been in place. And as Chuck said, you know, this resident has a personal interest in making sure that this gets restored. So it's more than just a compliance issue. There's additional motivation for this resident, and I applaud that and I encourage that. So I don't know what other people think.
John or Scott, you guys have any thoughts?
Not so much. I really don't know all of the history behind this, and I doubt we want to get into it.
I do have a question. Has the applicant for building the house at Zero Haverhill backed off from having the land transferred to this gentleman to move forward with his project?
I don't know about any side deal about land. I heard that there might be something in the works, but I don't have any understanding of if it has happened or not. I mean, this area is, you know, within the 25-foot buffer zone, so it doesn't matter who owns it. It's not usable. It's not going to be turned into lawn. So that's.
I believe there was something in the previous minutes that the applicant for Zero Haverhill wasn't really ready to move forward with that project. What he wanted to do is he wanted to give that land to that homeowner, and then have the town go after that homeowner for doing work on land that was in the wetlands. I believe that's in one of the minutes that we're looking to approve this evening.
That might have been one of the original ones, Dave. I don't think that was the last meeting. I have to go back to the minutes. But, I think I do recall what you said and it being brought up. I haven't heard anything like that previous. In fact, I think in the last meeting we talked with Zero Haverhill about what the process was for that area, of whether it was essentially a deed restriction or turned over to the town. Because there is a stuff that area could potentially be just either conservation restriction or fully deeded.
Yeah, so what you're asking, Dave, is that if the land would be given to this homeowner or sold to this homeowner, and then the town would go after him, meaning the Conservation Commission would go after them. But if the work is done. That might have been a plan if this wasn't such a cooperative homeowner back in the beginning. So there's no need for that type of plan, in my opinion. I don't know. I mean, you know, you have a lot of tools to do enforcement and to do your work around town, but you know, sometimes just talking to people works. Sometimes just, you know, going out there and introducing yourself and just saying that something went wrong and let me explain it to you is the best way to do things. Now, I'm not guaranteeing that this won't turn bad. I have no control over that, but I can tell you from hearing from this guy and dealing with him, he seems like he understands the situation. He has this need to stop the people from doing the dumping back there, which is a territorial thing. I think he has pride in his lawn and his house and all that. So if that was a plan at the beginning, it's no longer needed, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's what I would just add to the idea of the enforcement order and whether to close it or update is, what I've seen, at least in my opinion, has been quick action, the desire to turn this around and get it fixed. Anika? I think I saw you.
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Any other comments from the commission?
In that case, I'll make a motion to close this enforcement order.
Second.
Michael Flynn in favor.
Anika Scanlon in favor.
Martha?
Martha Moore in favor.
David Pinette in favor.
Carl Sacconi in favor.
John Sullivan in favor.
Keith in favor.
Great.
All right, Leah, we'll hear from you in November. You're not required to come to the meeting. If we could just have that report. If there's something wrong, contact me. We'll do a site visit.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too. All right. Move on to the next item on the agenda. This is a continued public hearing for a notice of intent for 0 Havel Street, filed by Mark Hall, MG Hall Contracting, under the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Reading Protection Bylaw, Section 7.1, for the proposed construction of a single-family home. Just to give a little recap of where we left off at the last meeting, I think we had received updated plans from the applicant, and most of this discussion was around concrete pads and patio and deck that were located in the back. The commission had asked the applicant to go back and look at providing those items. The issue that came up is that all of that was within the 35 to 25 foot zone. So the commission had asked the applicant to go back and look at putting those structures on the north side if there was something that could potentially reduce impacts to the wetland. I think that was the one of the big open items. The other open item I know was just what we talked about, the land in the back and what was could be provided as mitigation, which was the however many acres of land, whether that was going to be deeded or a conservation restriction. So with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant. Maureen, are you?
I'm here.
Hey.
Okay.
Go ahead. Your show.
So as the chairman mentioned, we took a look at putting the structures on the northerly side of the dwelling. So we proposed a deck and a patio area, as well as some retaining walls. This is similar to the Randall Road project that was mentioned at the previous hearings. And that's what's in front of you this evening. Chuck, can you bring up the plan or?
Yeah, I'm trying to get to it. Sorry about the delay. There we go.
Okay, no problem.
Yep, sorry about that. So the other one's available too. The first plan that shows, so this plan is everything the commission asked for. Everything is on the side of the house. There's nothing in the back. The back will probably be lawn and an area to kick a soccer ball around. As you can see, they had to work really hard on the stairs, as it was brought to my attention that just to get them down, it wraps around. But there's a deck and a pervious patio area. So that's, and you've received this in your
Chuck, I think you
packet.
hit one of my questions. Maureen, would the plan be for like the area now in back of the house to just be grassed up to the fence post?
Yes, because, my take from the last commission meeting was the commission wanted nothing in the backyard.
Yep. Would there be any sort of exit out of the back, or would the exit be strictly through the north side?
Just to the north side, my understanding from the commission, you didn't want an egress or even a concrete, pad outside the door area.
And then I would add, and I know I brought this up in the last meeting that I would still be willing to see this to allow seeing it on that north side. I'd be still willing to consider seeing it go across the 35-foot zone. I think you go across 35, correct? Do you know what the square footage that goes across the 35-foot?
Yeah, so the applicant is proposing 74 square feet of the deck and 133 square feet for the paver patio.
Okay. Anybody else have it? Carl?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Chuck had mentioned, and I don't see it on the plan, but pervious patio, meaning is that the type of paver it's going to be down? Will it be a pervious paving, or is it an impervious, like concrete paver? Or
So it'll be a paver patio, which does offer some perviousness to it because it's not like a concrete type patio. So it'll provide some pervious.
Maureen, what's the difference, and what's the difference in upgrading it into a pervious patio?
My understanding is how it's constructed.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes the difference, and I don't know the details on that.
Do you think that was just an oversight, or do you have knowledge that they just want to do as minimal a patio as possible? Because I think pervious, I would almost think that the applicant would understand that this would supposedly should be a pervious patio.
I don't think the applicant walked away with that, but that's something obviously we can provide with the commission. I don't think it's a huge deal or a deal breaker in this situation. So we can do that.
You can make that a condition. Okay.
John?
Yeah, so does this patio extend underneath the deck?
No, it does not. So underneath the deck, you're going to have the AC condenser, and you're also going to have like a step down because there'll be an egress underneath there. Okay. So the limit of the patio, the hatch marks, that's the limit of it.
Go ahead, Nika.
Maureen, can you just comment on what type of, what's going to be put between the house and the edge of the 25-foot? Is that going to be grass?
Yes.
Or is that going to be planted in a special way?
No, we would like that to be grass if possible. And we are proposing a post and rail fence all along that limit, so that edge will be clearly defined.
And Maureen, the stairs are still going down off the driveway.
Yes, well, just to provide some access from the driveway, we would like to have stairs there if possible.
Right.
Carl, maybe I just didn't lower your hand, but did you get your comment in?
Yeah, I think I just had a question about the paving. I'm trying to understand how big it's quite the patio. It's a 10 by 16 deck, and it's probably bigger than the deck. It's like, or similar, Maureen? Is it about 10 by 50 something? 10 by...
1 second, I can scale it off for you.
In the proposed wall, that graphic basically wraps around the deck, the patio, right? So we're retaining that area there, right?
Right, so when you step out, the first level onto the deck area, you're at elevation 206.
Mm-hmm.
And the patio is at 196. So it's a 10-foot difference. That's why you have the stairs wrapping around in that area.
Yeah.
And that's why we have the retaining walls in that area as well.
Yeah, so that stairs is taking up a lot of square footage, and then now the patio is there for,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 170, yeah. It's probably, it's funny, it's probably a similar square footage if the owner decided to do a patio without our knowing in the rear of the house. But I suppose it's in a better location.
So the reason why we wouldn't get a patio in the back of the house is because there's nothing there now. So this moving everything to the side, you're going to have to redesign the interior of the house. So, he could install a new sliding glass door in the back where it says 44 and put in a patio back there. But those are reviewed by the Conservation Commission, and you could just set aside this area not to be built. This is the limit of whatever you want to be built back here. And I would also bring to your attention over at Randall Road, those houses are very close, just like this one is also. And in the back, it was up against the 25, and we allowed that to be grass because the space was very limited.
Maureen, would there be any changes to the trees that have to be cut? I mean, from where I sit, it seems like, and this is part of my concern, is with the second floor deck, it was creeping in on two of the trees that I don't think were proposed to be taken, but it was maybe a little bit unclear. Do you know if there's changes to the trees associated with having it here?
I don't think so. 1 second. So the maybe list of trees, I included tree number 11, which is I guess near the 195.50. I think number 12 we could keep. I think that's further enough away. And then I included all the other trees to the left. So I don't think so. I think I included all of the maybe trees that the commission asked me to look at.
All right. Anika?
Maureen, one question I have regarding the patio area. I assume that the contractor or the owner is going to want to have that patio area somewhat privatized. Some sort of privacy screen between the patio and Haverhill Street. Do you have any thoughts on that? That would change the design in that area?
Not that it would change the design. I think he's going to use the vegetation. Do plantings, do like a soft type look, a privacy look, whether it's arborvitae or something of that nature. Obviously, it's a wooded lot, so we are taking down some trees, and I think he'll use those trees in that location for privacy.
Okay, thanks.
Martha?
Okay, I'm just looking at it and thinking that moving the patio to the side was supposed to get the structures out of the no structure zone, and it looks like we've got just about the same square footage inside the no structure zone as we started with when it was back in the back. It gives them a bigger patio, but it still is infringing into that no structure zone. And I'm wondering how that retaining wall in the front, it sounds like it's about a 10-foot step down from the lawn in the front down to the patio. How does it work when it goes around on the back side, the proposed 12 48-inch segmented block wall on that side? Does it get shorter as it gets toward the 25-foot and the post and rail fence?
Yes, it gets shorter in that location.
Okay.
The reason why we submitted this design was because this is very similar to Randall Road. And what I heard from the last meeting was the commission wanted us to consider this type of design. You know, my client's open to do the previous design with the deck in the back and a concrete pad for a walkout and the AC condenser. He's open to that design as well. It's just a matter of, I think, getting the commission on board as to what you feel comfortable with and what we can possibly do with the lot.
Mm-hmm. So my other question,
just for
yep.
Quickly, Martha, just for a point of clarification, and Marie, correct me if I'm wrong, but so the retaining wall, you know, where it meets the house in the front, so near the 196 up there, that's a 4-foot tall wall, not a 10-foot tall. The first floor is elevated, but the ground is
right.
Not
So if you look at the front steps, you have an elevation of 202 there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have 200 and the patio is at 196.
Okay.
So it'll be 4 feet by the corner of the house, and then it decreases in elevation as it goes around back of the patio towards the wetland.
Yeah, sorry. Somehow I had
10
heard
foot tall.
206 and 196. I misheard that. Yeah, so even that 4-foot retaining wall gives you some privacy on the patio. So you don't need huge bushes to make the rest of the privacy. Yeah.
Right, but I do think he'll be incorporating a lot of plantings just to make it look green, to make it look nice, and to provide that privacy.
So the other question I had, if they're planning to have grass in back and steps down from the driveway, how do you get your lawnmower down there, or is it small enough grass they can use a weed whacker or something to keep it maintained?
Well, I would think they would have a push mower, and if I was them, I'd probably keep it under the deck for easy access. You know, to be able to mow the back, or maybe they'll do it by a weed whacker. It's not obviously a large area back there.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Oh, can I go?
Go ahead, Carl.
Maureen, I forget, and I can't find the last plan. Was there a wall proposed along the 25-foot, or just the fence in the rear?
There was a wall proposed along the back.
Because that's when the deck was there.
Yes.
And now we've removed that wall because we don't need the grading, but we have a wall now around the patio, right?
Correct.
So we don't have 2 walls, we just have 1 wall again. Okay. Okay.
Right, there's no wall back there.
Just around the patio proposed on the new plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anika?
Maureen, do you think the applicant would be willing to consider converting that grass lawn in the back to more natural vegetation in exchange, sort of, for the infringement on the 35-foot with the patio and the deck?
Honestly, no. And the reason why I say that is the only real usable private space is behind the dwelling. And I understand we're asking for waivers. We are providing the town with 12.8 acres of land. I mean, I don't know. I just picture a young family with possibly small children. You would want them in the backyard playing as opposed to beside the house near the busy road. Honestly, he'd like some usable space behind the house.
Do you think, as a follow-up, do you think there could be some additional plantings kind of on the, sort of near the easement on the right side of the lot? Near tree 5 and 3, not in the
Sure.
easement.
Absolutely. I mean, we're going to be doing a lot of plantings and landscaping this lot, so that's not a problem.
Because I'm sort of thinking, you know, if the purpose of the 35-foot is to protect, you know, the 35-foot, it is fairly, it's a number that the commission has come up with over time and over history. But the commission has discretion to change that 35-foot line. I like sticking with it. But I just want to say that, you know, if that additional 10-foot between 25 and 35 is to protect the vegetation and to ensure the protection of the 25-foot vegetated zone, which is what that additional 10 feet is for, or at least that was the rationale given in our town regulations. You know, maybe some additional habitat enhancement somewhere in that area could be undertaken.
That's not a problem. We can do that.
I don't know what other commissioners think of that idea, but it could be useful as well for anybody driving southbound on Haverhill. It could provide a little bit of additional vision buffer.
Right.
Before they see the house.
So, Anika, I did have my hand raised, but would we typically ask or to see at some point a landscape plan, right?
Right.
Okay, because I think there is. I can't, of course, help but just think from a design sense or sort of usability of the site. I mean, at 44 feet long by 10-foot patch of earth, I mean, there's definitely some room for some, you know, shrubbery back there, which still maintaining, because I agree it'd be great for the client, the homeowner, to have a nice area, right, of lawn, green lawn. Everyone likes green lawn. But I do think between that and then in front of the patio, you know, there could be some. They've clearly left a buffer strip along the patio too. At some point, if you can see to the rear towards 25-foot, there's some sort of 3-foot bed there or something, I'm assuming for planting. And then Maureen too, so now again, I'm assuming the patio is 200 and something square feet now. Where would the water be going now? I think I see a catch basin, like an elevation. Would that just be kind of pitched into like the existing sort of lawn area, or?
Right. So the patio, from what I hear from the commission, you're asking it to be pervious. So all of that will infiltrate into the ground from the patio area.
Okay, so if it is pervious, that's great. And okay, good. Yeah, sorry. So right, if it, never mind then. Okay, good. Okay.
All right, so I feel like I'm hearing a general consensus that this is the way we asked the applicant the plan that we asked the applicant to put out last time, that this is the way that seems to make the most sense, provide the most protection, gets, while there's still structure crossing the 35-foot zone, there's maybe, as Anika mentioned, some conditions that we could put to help improve that buffer where it does cross. I guess, I guess I'm getting the feeling that the commission feels like this is the better plan. I think I'll give I feel like I do. I like that we've moved it away from the back. I think we've moved it away from the tree line. This is close to what I was envisioning. And I think it makes more sense for the long-term protection of the wetland over there.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. And I think along with seeing the landscape plan, the pervious paving is an awesome idea. And I think it's a pretty nice area. It's a big area. So I think they should be happy with that.
So is the commission going to require a landscape plan prior to planting?
Prior to planting.
Yeah, I think
right. Yeah.
Something like
generally,
that.
Chuck, with something like this, we've said, and I think what's been talked about with this project so far has been because of the unknowns associated with the trees, that we were going to allow the landscape plan to come in, after the certificate of compliance, but we needed to see a plan before they started planting. I think that's what we've talked about.
So does the commission want, Maureen, do you want to talk about the plan and what type of plan you'd like to provide? But before you do that, I wanted to say for the commission, don't forget that, you can allow this applicant to, maintain his lawn, that very small amount, and have them plant inside the 25-foot area, because that's also appropriate if there's areas that you wanted more planting. So,
Chuck, you mean proposed planting
within the 25-foot Z and V? Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Anika.
So the one question I had was, with the landscape plan, does the commission require a landscape architect plan? Or is it just kind of generic, these are the native plants, this is where it's going to go?
Sure. Let me, before the commission answers, since we're using the template of Randall Road, can you tell us what happened out there? Do you know if there was just a landscaper that came up with a plan, or did you go through a landscape architect to develop a plan? Because I don't remember that. I know that there was a landscape plan, but I also know that it was completely modified by the end of that project.
So I know for the subdivision, my client hired a landscape architect, but that was for the three lot subdivision. So for the individual house lot that had a similar patio deck layout, I didn't work on that, so I'm not sure what they did.
So I would say that we would allow the applicant to come up with a plan and not require a landscape architect. And if it doesn't come up to a certain standard, then you could go back and ask them for more detail on the landscape architect. It seems to me
that works.
It seems to me there's going to be enough trees. We've pushed off the trees until we can understand. So me and Maureen are going to look at all the trees and find out if any can be saved, or if some other ones have to come down, and then planting also. So when we have the numbers from the trees, we would understand the planting, and then Anika's request for an additional amount of planting by the easement area. So, I mean, that's kind of how I would look at it, but, Alex, what do you think?
Carl. I think he was asking Carl.
Oh,
it just.
It says.
Oh, sorry, that's my wife. Sorry. No, I think that makes sense. We've typically, I feel like, accepted that, and I think that's what we'll take a look at it, and we'll have our kind of thoughts. But I think we can help along if there's anything we feel that is missing. But I mean, I think the time and the trouble to go through that is, it's more of a functional plan to me than just aesthetics. So,
Anika, did you have something?
Thanks. I just want to sort of recap and add something. So it seems to me the planting has to address the replacement of trees that are taken. And one thing I wanted to propose was that the plantings proposed, similar to what I was talking about earlier regarding plantings near the patio, between the patio and the easement area. I was thinking, maybe, the planting area could be roughly equivalent to the amount of area taken up with impervious or taken up with structures between the 35 and the 25. I see the driveway, the steps, we have, I'm not sure if we would include the patio space because it can be, if it's not managed right, it's not going to infiltrate too well. But it's definitely an infringement on a growing zone.
So I have a question. Are you looking at between the 35 and the 25 foot, or the 25 foot and the resource area?
Between I'm talking about the areas where work is going to happen between the 25 and the 35 foot. I'm sort of throwing around the possibility of making a planting area of similar size.
So my question is, when you're talking about planting and you're talking about mitigation, why does it have to come out of what is left for play area on this very small lot? And I brought that up before, but it doesn't seem, and I'm just saying it's stronger this time. There's not much land out there. We asked for this thing to be put around the corner, and it sounds like there's still some asks going on. I think we're down to the most minimal amount of yard. It pushes the kids closer to the street to have, to take away that 25 to 35 foot area, which can be lawn, unlike the 25 to the resource area. So I wanted to bring that up. I want to just make it clear that all the planting can go in the resource area, just like we just did on B Street.
I don't disagree, Chuck,
Mm-hmm.
but I guess I do want to get some understanding of, does every place on this plan that is not developed, does every place on this plan that is outside of the 25 foot zone, is this going to be finished as all grass? In other words, near trees 42, 43, and 44. Like that little, on the other side of that fence, is that going to be grass or is that going to be native vegetation? You know what I mean? I sort of want to get a sense of how much of this is going to be lawn and how much.
So this area here?
Sorry, let me see if I can see where you're pointing to. Yeah.
Well, I think that, obviously that's up for grabs for, to turn back into native.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying let's take away their usable space. What I'm saying is, can we sort of have an opportunity there to vegetate other areas that make most sense, are most contiguous, and maybe on the most outermost edges of the lot? Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Is there an opportunity to do some plantings in those other spaces.
It's like
Well,
there's
sorry.
No,
That area that Chuck's pointing to, I mean, there may be some space available in there, but it's wooded as well.
Okay, yeah.
So.
It would have shady plants.
Right. So, I mean, without kind of seeing it cleared and seeing if there's any space available, that entire lot's wooded.
I mean, I think the point is we're at this section where we've put off a lot of this, and we're just kind of guessing what this is going to look like. I think between the site visits with me and Maureen and whoever commissioner wants to be out there, a plan will be developed, and then this bring it closer, bring it in the 35 foot, and what about this? That all can happen at that point. I mean, we're going to get a plan prior to, I don't know, final grading or something like that.
Sure.
I agree, Chuck.
All right.
All right. So I guess beyond that, and I think we did settle this last time, but I apologize. You might have to remind me here. I think what we had said for an order of conditions as far as the land that's proposed, was there a decision on turning it over versus conservation restriction versus, I don't remember where we ended up there. I apologize, Maureen.
You know what? I don't know where we ended up either. I know the topic was on the table. Obviously, the less painful approach is to put it in a deed restriction or donate it to the town or something of that nature. I know a conservation restriction takes quite a bit of time. Obviously, we're open to do it however the commission feels comfortable with. That's not a problem. I guess it's up to you folks how you'd like it.
I think that we want to leave.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Sure. I was going to say, I think all those options should be on the table and should be written into the order of conditions. I was hoping Bill Crowley would talk to whoever he would talk to, Bob LaLashore, and find out if he wants a land donation, and then that could be possible. I could also bring that up myself, but I think Bill would bring it up also to Bob or whoever in town that would look into that, maybe Gene Delios. But I couldn't accept the land without getting permission from, people like Bob LaLashore, Gene Delios, and the select board. The conservation restriction, the way that process works is we can get a conservation restriction. Ultimately, the town select board needs to sign off on that. It does take a long time. My least favorite is a deed restriction. So I would say deed restriction is number 3, CR for the land. The only reason why I'm interested in having the land turned over is because we already have all of Timber Neck Swamp. So it's already owned by the commission. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think as long as, Maureen, as long as your clients were open to keeping it open-ended as part of the order of conditions, that it could be, any one of those 3 that we work out, with the understanding that, because I agree with Chuck, that the restriction or turning over, the deed restriction is my least attractive of those as well. I think if we're going to create a restriction, we should go through the conservation process.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I mean, the intent was always to provide this land to the town and have it connect to Timber Neck Swamp. That was always the intent of the filing, so no problem.
And just, we've always run into the problem if it turns into a conservation restriction, you're absolutely right. It does take a long time. And what seems to take the longest time is to get that coordination between the proponent's lawyer, the town council, the select board, the conservation commission to happen, and it doesn't happen within 6 or 8 or 9 months. So with that, it should be started right away to find out whether it's going to be a gift or a CR, and then the CR should be worked on immediately, because we've been in this position where the applicant says, I have someone who wants to get in, and the CR is not finalized. Of course, we'll listen, but we have one on Arcadia Road. Same thing happened to us, and the CR is still not finalized. It's been 2 years.
Okay.
I'd also like to bring something up, David Panett. I would like to just make mention, because you mentioned Arcadia Road, that there was a condition that was put in the order conditions that no building permit was going to be able to be obtained before the conservation restriction was in place.
Yeah.
And, I would not be in favor of conservation restriction if that restriction was also placed on this lot. I don't think that's fair.
If I hear you right, you do not want it to be tied to the building permit.
No.
Right.
Exactly
No, and I agree. The reason why we did that on 113 is because they were a year away from even getting started. So they weren't ready to break ground. I believe that this applicant is ready to break ground immediately. So it should be tied to the occupancy permit or the certificate of compliance.
I'd prefer the certificate of compliance if it's tied to the occupancy permit, and you know that may get delayed having the homeowner move in, especially if this pandemic continues for the next year or two.
Well, my suggestion is we would tie it to the occupancy, but then review it based on, I mean, the commission's not hard and fast. So if it's not going to work, then we could always just move it to the certificate of compliance. But
so Chuck, I'll just say I agree with what you're saying, and you know, I think this is essentially what we ended up with at Arcadia is, you're right. We kept on moving it. I'd rather see it tied to an earlier stage, because the commission can always vote to change and find good reason to push it to later if we feel like we see progress. But I think that was always my take, was that was always the intent with something like Arcadia, was like we wanted to see movement. We wanted to see that it was things were happening, and that it wasn't just like, oh yeah, we'll get to that when we get to that. Whenever we want to close the project, maybe we'll think about it. I think I like the idea of having it tied to occupancy, at least for now, because it encourages that, just like you said, let's get this process moving. So
the other reason, and so just how these things work is occupancy, and Dave Bennett knows this, occupancy is needed. You cannot move in without that, but there's no requirement to get a certificate of compliance until you either refinance or sell the house. Now, the owners might want that prior to moving in, but if they don't and they're willing to waive that and just deal with it as in the future, we've lost, we've lost our pressure. So I think that Bill Crowley did tell me that he would be doing that, and that he anticipates getting on it right away. I expected it to be a lot quicker than the last one, and the delay in that was they just didn't understand how long these things take. I think the commission signed it right away. We had a few changes, but outside of that, it's really just been sitting in town council waiting for them to review it, and that's our town council.
okay. Maureen, any other items?
I don't think so.
Anybody on the commission have anything else? If not, I'll open it up to the public. Any public questions or comments?
Rick?
All right, Rick.
Yeah, I'm one of the
Rick, you there?
I'm just Rick Marino, 114 Haverhill Street, and I'm just a little concerned on, I know it was mentioned in the past, I don't see it on the screen at the moment, but the easement that apparently was going to be provided at some point. Could you put that on the screen if possible? It was supposed to be a town easement.
So, Rick, you can actually see it on the screen on the right side. Do you see the,
right here?
the solid
Okay.
line?
Yeah, okay.
So there's a solid line that's the property line, and then there's a dash line.
Yeah, I see it. Thank you. I'm just concerned with that location, just for the fact that, let's say in who knows, the future, way in the future, with Haverhill Street being so busy, and I know it abuts my property, but with Haverhill Street being so busy, there's no parking. Could that be located someplace else to give that proper access to the town if and when they ever need it? Because I know it also has to be built up a lot because there's a big dip from that section, and I'm sure you've seen it. It's a very big dip, and I just, I've been here for over 25 years, and I just think it's not the greatest location, especially, like I said, there's no parking on Haverhill Street, and it's a much more busier street than coming in off of Charles Street.
So
Yeah, so the one thing I would say is
Go ahead, Mike.
so I don't recall, I know we looked into whether there were access elsewhere. I think the important piece is access is necessary to that back area. And right now, Rick, my take, there is no plan to change what that looks like or change what exists there. It's required that we have some way to actually get to the back. And so that means we have right, we as the town, if it's being restricted, the town needs to have the ability to have the rights to get back there.
And I'm not disputing that. I'm just disputing the location, especially with the cul-de-sac that I live on, with the kids around, and like I said, the parking. There's no parking on Haverhill Street, and I think that's just opening up for that location a can of worms where it's so close to houses and not, let's say, just in the middle, because I know on the Charles Street side of that big piece of property, I mean, the houses are much more far apart, and it's a lot less traffic. And like I said, I'm just concerned of that specific, and why couldn't it be someplace else where there's less traffic? Number one, I just think it's opening up problems for the area. I know it would be probably restricted to town personnel only, but that's not going to stop anybody from walking through it, or using the bikes, kids. I hear the stories through town. Kids were in the forest or this or that, and I just think it's one more place. And because of the proximity to Haverhill Street, I just would, like that to be reconsidered for someplace else on that property.
Yeah, I mean, somebody refresh me if I'm missing it, but I think we had looked into if there were other areas. I think that this area made the most sense. I think I would just reiterate, Rick, that one of the key important parts of this is, while we see the line on the page, it's not that line remains a line on a page, and not necessarily some big bright light saying town has easement and access here. Please go there. So I think that's an important piece of this. The idea as part of this plan is that area, while it's shown and is turned over so that we have access, doesn't really look any different from what it looks like today.
Mr. Chairman, if I may address that, I went to look at other areas because the neighbors were concerned, obviously, and I understand their concerns. So the other two potential access areas are 15 B Street, where that violation had occurred. And as you know, at the end of B Street, it's very wet there. The other access point was Crocus Lane. And again, that area was very wet in that location as well. It just wasn't possible to put the access there. What I can do and what's been requested is that I can load up plantings within that easement all the way out to the sidewalk onto the lot. So that would discourage, I mean, the easement will be there, but it will discourage anybody walking in that location.
So you're proposing to plant in the easement?
Yes.
So no, we wouldn't want that. So this easement, so we've gone through the exercise of looking in other spots. We've turned this from a pulverized stone dust path into just an easement on paper, but you can't plant on an easement because conservation restrictions need to be monitored once a year. There needs to be access out there. So it has to act like an easement. If someone wants to walk out there, if I have to get out there, I don't have the opportunity to walk in the yard. In all the areas that we looked at, they all had the same impediments, and this one being on the actual lot that's being developed seemed the less, have the less pushback from what would have happened with the easement. So I don't agree with planting on the easement. I don't think it's going to be used. It's not going to be highlighted in any way. Once a year, a conservation guy, with a walking stick is going to go out there, maybe in the ice, and just make sure that there's no encroachment and check on the property lines. That's all that ever happens.
Martha, may I meet you?
I'm looking at the fence that's going along the 25-foot line, and it looks like the fence comes to a stop at the easement so that Chuck would be able to walk through there. I wonder if the fence could have a gate, but the gate's normally closed, and Chuck could open the gate and walk through, but it would make it look much more discouraging for random kids to walk into the woods, as Mr. Moreno is worried about? Or are you not allowed to have a fence across?
No, you're not allowed to impede the easement at all. I learned that from the engineering department. I don't want to see anything on the easement. I don't want to come up with some clever idea how to cover it up. It's there. They can run the fence out along the easement out to Haverhill Street, but no other spot.
Go ahead.
That's how I see it.
Okay, I just want to emphasize that maybe Mr. Moreno has already understood this based on the conservation's response, but I just want to emphasize, Mr. Moreno, that this easement is in no way right now proposed to be a public trail of any sort. It's not there for public use. And, for right now, there's no plan for any, as part of this application, there's no active discussion or plan about a trail. I can't make any promise about what people are going to decide in the future. But I just want to make that point if it wasn't clear already.
Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I thank you for that, and I was pretty clear with that. I'm just concerned with, and I understand the easement aspect. I'm just, like I said, concerned that at some point there's going to be a bulldozer going down and pave it out a nice little pathway, because I know the land, it dips, it's wet, it's all marsh, it's a whole bunch of different things back there, and that's just basically my main focal concern.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Moreno. I think you're right. I think my take is that so we've exhausted up what we're looking at for other options there. I guess, are there any other comments from the public? Go ahead, Nika.
I wanted to make a motion to close the hearing.
I'll second that.
Michael Flynn, chair, in favor.
Anika Scanlon, in favor.
Martha Moore, in favor.
Scott Keith, in favor.
Go ahead, Dave, if you're unmuted.
David Pennett in favor.
Carl Sacconi in favor.
John Sullivan in favor.
Right, and I think we already got Scott. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Anika.
I wanted to check with Chuck's schedule, but I was also entertaining a motion to issue an order of conditions.
No, we don't want to do that. This is not typical times. So I'm going to work on this order of conditions. I think it's a very simple one, but I don't want to be under any restriction because first off, we don't have to be because of all the governor's,
orders.
Yeah, orders. Thank you. So expect to have some correspondence back and forth, Maureen, and I hope to have it done by the next meeting. But I don't want to be under that restriction for this one. It's just too hard during, between being at home and running back and forth to work and having to access material. So I think we did that for 259 Main Street, and I recommend that we do that again.
That's fine. I understand. Just, give me a heads up just so I can tell my client and so he's not calling you and I can kind of,
Yeah.
Well, give you the time you need.
Expect it next week, but if it doesn't happen, then we'll just put it off for one meeting and then it should be fine. Okay, so we could probably issue it at the next meeting if it's not written.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen.
All right, bye-bye.
All right. The next item on the agenda, 106 Colonial Drive. The applicant has asked us to continue until the July 22nd meeting. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Michael Flynn, in favor.
Anika Scanlon, in favor.
Martha Moore, in favor.
David Pennett in favor.
Carl Sacconi in favor.
John Sullivan in favor.
Scott Keith, in favor.
All right. So one thing I'll add, and we're going to talk about this later a little bit more just in general, but keep this in mind, we're probably going to try to schedule a site visit for 106 Colonial. I think my understanding is the applicant may look to change. I think there's good reasons to get out there and for everyone to see it again. So we're gonna talk about the next site visits a little bit more because I think there's other items on there, but I just want everybody to keep it in mind that I know something was brought forward to us and we've continued, but there's going to be value in people going back and making sure we see this site. So be on the lookout for that. Old new business. This is a certificate of compliance request for 28 Intervale Terrace, Ring. This is 270-0172. Chuck, you've been there, correct? You've got some. Yeah. Thank you.
So here's the site. So Brandon Ring has proposed this work that's in the outer 100 and the outer 200-foot buffer zone of the Abidjona River. And you can see the work. It's an addition. It's a deck. They added some infiltration, and they tied the roof runoff into that. I've been out there. Everything looks and as it was requested in the order of conditions, and I recommend that we issue a certificate of compliance. I'm not sure if anyone else went out to the site, but if they have, can add to my report.
Any additions or questions, comments? I'm hearing none. Do I hear a motion?
I move we issue a certificate of compliance for 28 Interval Terrace.
Second.
Michael Flynn in favor.
Anika Scanlon in favor.
Arthur Moore in favor.
David Panett in favor.
Carl Ciccone in favor.
John Sullivan in favor.
Scott Keith in favor.
Great. All right, next item. Minor plan change, 270-0724, 59 Forest Street. This is notice of intent, order of conditions of forest. They're looking to add a fence. Chuck, is that correct?
Yeah, they're looking to add a fence in around the house, and I'm going to bring that up right now.
Chuck, do you know what kind of fence?
I don't. Let's see. So I don't know why I don't have the whole screen, but so this went out in the packet, and you know, I think that I'm not sure what kind of fence it is. I don't see where it says what type of fence.
Chuck, when did this order of condition? When's this order of conditions from? Oh, this is the one that goes way back there. Okay.
This is almost a year old. Almost. So they were going to build around the garage, and they wanted to take down some Phragmite and then replant that area. This is off 4th Street, but it's like a compound. You go through the gates. There's 2 or 3 houses back there, and as you drive in on the left-hand side, it's all wetland, and across that wetland is Bethune Ave. So
Chuck, the only thing I saw was there's an open space, a utility / open space easement. Is that correct?
on the plan?
Yeah.
Let's see if I can look at this.
I think I saw it in the Word document that you were just showing too.
Yeah. Between the existing shed and the concrete foundation, there's a dotted line that says open space and utility easement.
Is that what you're talking about? That's a utility easement. That's not anything they put there. That's an encumbrance on their property.
Are they allowed to build a fence across it?
They have to get permission from the engineering department, but I don't think that engineering would have an issue. But I could make that a condition.
Yeah. If it's open space, would that be our responsibility? I guess I've never really seen, I've seen utility easement. I've never seen it called open space / utility and utility easement.
No, I didn't look into that. To me, it's not a typical utility easement. It looks pretty large. I'm not sure if it even shows up on the GIS.
Could it have something to do with the way the original permit was made to take this, what was a horse farm or something, and turn it into 3 lots? Did they require leaving a certain amount of open space?
I don't know that we'll know.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't look into that. I didn't get any comments, guys, until the night of the meeting. So those are good questions. We could just get answers to these questions.
Yeah. I think we should. I didn't even notice. I mean, I think I remember this thing being way off. I didn't even notice that the open space piece of it until literally you pulled up the Word document.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Are they, I don't know, Chuck, did you get a feel from them? Are they like, this is the last thing left on the project and?
No, the as-built isn't in. This is just something that they would like to get moving on, just like everybody. But it has come in, but I can get, it does look like it's a base plan that someone, added their own information to. So they might not even know what the open space utility easement is.
Yeah. I mean, I'm open to what other people think, but my take would be, I'd like us to just, just because I'm not even sure what it means if it means nothing. I'm not opposed to the fence from a conservation standpoint. I don't know that I want to just say if it is, well, even if it were our responsibility from that, I guess I'd want to make sure we understand, like, well, why was it, if we ever would, or, yeah. I guess I'd like to look into that more. I'm waffling here, but I'd like to look into that more. Go ahead, Nika.
I just want to say from the fencing standpoint, yeah, we definitely can't create an obstruction in an easement if that's not permitted. But so it sounds like there's 2 new hurdles. But the second hurdle about the fencing that I was wondering about was, just as long as the fencing doesn't restrict access of wildlife movement.
That's always a standard condition.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah,
I don't think
put that in our language, right? That there needs to be a space.
What was that, Mike?
I think that's part of our standard language, that there needs to be the space below the bottom and.
Yep. I just wanted to mention it.
Sure. And I think getting into solving this utility easement part of this is outside the purview of the Conservation Commission. We could ask them to, get the permission from the engineering department prior to installing the fence as a condition. This is tied to an order of conditions, and so they would be bound by that. So that's all I
I'd
would.
be fine with that, Chuck. I guess my question was, if it is called, we only have, open space still wouldn't fall under our purview, right? Like, who's responsible for looking after the open space?
Yeah, I know, but how are you look? I mean, you're saying, well, a fence would be restricting the open space. It's clearly his own lot. I mean, I don't think it's open space where others can go in there at any time. It might be some sort of, so like I said, it was like a compound. Maybe it's something in the deed between the houses.
Yeah.
Supposed to be shared property. That, and again, that's why this is outside of our purview. I mean, it's not. You can say, look, let us know and take it up at the next meeting.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think we need to ask them about
that way.
All right. Get an answer to that at the next meeting. Any other questions?
Am I hearing any? All right.
Well, okay.
Go ahead.
Must be the last minute nature of this. I guess one additional question I have is this fencing proposed to be on existing lawn, or are any additional, is any vegetation going to be cut within the 100-foot zone to put this fence in? Because I'm trying to find a satellite picture for this plot on my mapping application, and I'm having a hard time finding it, but we can tackle that next time. Do we need a motion to continue the minor plan change?
Yeah.
So moved.
Second.
Michael Flynn in favor.
Anika Scanlon in favor.
Arthur Moore in favor.
David Pinette in favor.
Carl Ciccone in favor.
John Sullivan in favor.
Scott Keith in favor.
Right. All right, moving right along. 270-0727. This is 259 and 267 Main Street, map 12, lot 39 and 40. Last meeting we closed this. Chuck, is there any update?
No, there's no update. Well, what we decided at the last meeting is that it's in front of the CPDC and the zoning, and they're not going to get to that until after this meeting. So we decided not to do anything about this. We closed, and we're going to issue this in the future. And that's right. Martin is going to work on certain sections of the language that she was involved in. I'll put the rest together, and we'll come up with an order of conditions probably after planning and zoning are finished. So this is a placeholder on our on our agenda.
Okay.
There's 59 Forest Street. Ariel.
Okay, thank you.
It doesn't look like there's anything but lawn in the backyard. And then someone else's house is further back. So it gets drier as it goes into the backyard. And when you type in 59, all this area comes up. So there has to be some sort of mutual agreement between all the houses.
Administrator's report. No dumping signs?
Just still waiting on the no dumping signs. I expect them any minute now. We'll have DPW will install them. We'll probably be installing them at Bear Meadow. So the Bear Meadow is no mountain biking signs. And then there's no emergency permits written, and that enforcement order from Perfectos has to do with the parking on either side of that dumpster. And from what I've seen, they've done very well with staying off there. Being helped by the crisis, but still they've stayed off that area. And then now we're down to bills, which there are none, and the minutes for 2 sets of minutes. I don't know if everyone had a chance to look at those.
Chuck, I did look at the minutes. I reviewed them. I'm only going to vote on the minutes that I was present for.
Okay.
Which one was that, Nika? Just so.
I think that was June 10. I think that was the previous meeting.
Okay. Any other comments on the minutes?
Make motions separately, if you would.
Do I hear a motion on the minutes for 5/13?
Make a motion to approve the minutes of 5/13/20.
I'll second.
Michael Flynn in favor.
Anika Scanlon in favor.
Martha Moore in favor.
David Pinette in favor.
Carl Ciccone in favor.
John Sullivan in favor.
Scott Keith in favor.
Can I get a motion on the minutes for June 10th?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of 6/10/20.
Second.
Michael Flynn in favor.
Anika Scanlon in favor.
Martha Moore in favor.
David Pinette in favor.
Carl Ciccone in favor.
John Sullivan in favor.
Scott Keith in favor.
Okay. And I just got, before we adjourn, I got one item, and I kind of hit this. I know Chuck is going to be sending out an email coming up, I think, in the next meeting, so July 22nd. There's a couple certificate of compliances that will be coming up that I believe are for older projects, projects that are before even I was on the
Do you want me, Mike, do you want me to ask? Want me to fill in? Sure. So during what's been happening, I've put some projects off, and some people for some certificates of compliance that are like 30 years old that asked for revegetation. And there's been 106 Colonial who wants us to look at a couple of trees. And I think that things like that, and there were a couple other but I couldn't find my list. But that aside, I think there's 4 sites that I would like to have at least 3 commissioners go to. So we can get a determination to move forward or ask for more information. And the reason why I'd like the commissioners to go there is because these applications either came to the commission and we weren't able to solve it in the meeting, or they had nothing to do with this present commission, so it's all new material, so a site visit would make a lot of sense. So I was wondering if we could just institute the site visits on a certain day with a certain defined amount of people, just to see these projects and get them off the kind of like this list. So we used to do site visits on Tuesdays, but any day, any time works. And I know a lot of you guys work, but usually it was Martha, Mike, Carl had come, Dave. Always. So I'm not sure if anyone else can get to these or what times work, but just to hear the input from different commissioners is more valuable than just hearing it from myself.
So what I'll put out there, we had moved for a while to having site visits like in the middle of the day or in the morning or in the middle of the day. At the time, that was more convenient for Becky, who was chair, and she was attending basically every one. So we wanted to continue that. And then when I took over as chair, it was wintertime, and so later in the day just didn't make any sense because it was dark. I think considering right now the hours that we have for it being light, Chuck, do you think this is something that, like, if we did it at 5, we could still get in?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
It gets lit.
I'm just making sure there's not. That's what I figured. I mean, my take would be either the Monday or Tuesday before the next meeting. That we at 5 o'clock is generally my preference because that's just easier for work.
What about early in the morning?
I don't mind doing early in the morning as well. We could divide it up.
The only reason why I say that is if I I don't know what I would have done if I had to go out today at 5 o'clock. I think I would have said, yeah, I'll see you. It's 9 o'clock this morning was a very big difference than 5 o'clock this afternoon.
You mean temperature-wise, Dave?
Temperature-wise, yeah.
Yeah. So, what time is morning, Anika? Like 7, 8, 9, 6?
Between 8 and 10. My workday typically starts around 10.
Okay. So 5 o'clock can work better for me then.
And there's no requirement that it goes in one group. I'd like. I want to reiterate Chuck's point. I'd like to see, at least 3 commissioners get there. So if it needs to happen at different times, I think it's a good. I always think it's a good idea when we try to get there as groups. I think we see things a little bit better. But if it needs to be 2, I think that seems reasonable as well.
Well, as the day comes up, just throw it out. People that can make it can make it. People that can't, do an alternative time.
If we're looking at just before the next meeting, I'd rather do Tuesday the 21st than Monday the 20th, and 5 p.m. works fine with me. Morning is okay, but I'd just as soon go at 5.
Okay, I could do that with Martha. I'll do that.
I can do that with you guys.
I also want to encourage our associate member and our newer members to join, to chime in and add when you're available and when you can join on the site visits.
I could do the 5 o'clock on the 21st.
I can do morning or evening. Either of those days, I'm not going anywhere.
And what are we shooting for? 106 Colonial or for the 21st?
Yeah, 106 Colonial, I think, is just she's identified 5 trees she wants to take down. She's having a little tough time figuring out how to do the replacement part of it. I just thought if the commission members were able to understand what she's asking, then when it got back to the meeting, we would be able to see the trees and make some better recommendations than imagining they're, sequoias or something like that. So
Chuck, can we set up site visits that day on the 21st for the morning and the afternoon?
So Tuesday, the 21st, I would only be able to make the morning one, but you could. And then how many people, as long as there's only 3 commissioners, then there's not an issue. I don't have to set it up any other way with, an agenda or notification. So.
Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it would be you and me the morning of the 21st.
I would say so.
And we can take one more person.
So I'll go on the 21st also. And another commissioner can still go. And who's going at night?
Me, Martha, and who else was it? Yeah.
Nicola.
Nicola.
Are there limit restrictions on the amount of people that can attend at one time?
No, I was just going to say, we don't have to, I think what Chuck's trying to say, right, is that moving forward, if at least the variety of us could make it is more beneficial, but.
I think we can get through this with doing it just twice. This upcoming meeting and the following meeting, and then we don't have to have this schedule anymore. But some of the things are like Austin Prep, their wetland mitigation area didn't take off. It needs to be seen. I don't think the elevation is correct. They have pea stone in the causeway now. That wasn't something that we told them they could do. Does that matter to anyone? There's been some other things that I've been dealing with them, but those 2 things the commission needs to look at. Zero Small Lane. There's a bigger project with Small Lane, but some houses that exist there, like 22 and next to them, they have some certificates of compliance that are old that need to be signed off on. So what I think some sort of land transfer can happen with the development. So that has to happen. But that's also something that the commission has to sign off on. And then down on Arcadia, I think it's 53 Arcadia, they have some old orders of conditions. They've collected them. I think there's 2 or 3. And they want to do a request to take down some trees very close to the easement. And that is the Abidjona River right there. They've done a lot of work on their house. They've had many orders of conditions out there. So that really needs to be looked at by the commission. So if we got through that list within the next 2 meetings, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I think what I would reiterate from Chuck is I think there's going to be an importance here in the next 2 meetings. I think a lot of these are going to be easy items when it comes to the meeting. But it's going to be important that we get out, we see it, and we come prepared and understand the details. They may be small, but they're going to be the details. So it may not be something like Main Street where it's a long presentation or what it is, but we need to make sure we understand what we're looking at. So.
Chuck, can we plan on doing the 106 Colonial and 0 Small at the same time, since they're so close?
Yeah, do you think you can get to Austin Prep on the same morning?
Probably. I don't have anything on my schedule.
I'll throw out a schedule. I'll put everyone's name on the schedule, and I'll just let you know where what I'm looking for you guys to have a look at. And then you can decide if you can make all of them. I think there's going to be 4. And if you can do all 4 of them, then that's great.
Chuck, another question I have for you, just as an aside. Was there something that the Conservation Commission needed to go to the land out behind John Costigan's house? I happened to see him today, and he told me he had some trees that fell down behind his house in the conservation area.
Where is he located at?
Off of Mill Street, right behind the
Oh, is that him right next to the parking lot for the
Lob's Pond?
Yep.
That was part of that whole confusion with the town tree warden. Yeah, he has some trees back there that look like they're pretty dangerous, but I've made my decision on him. The tree warden knows about it, and he's just waiting. He's not waiting for the Conservation Commission, waiting for the DPW department.
Oh, okay.
But beyond that one, in the future, the town tree warden and the conservation commission, or just me, will make a determination together. So it won't be so broken up, and Costigan would have known what was going on. But this one, it kind of worked in two separate pieces.
All right. He would seem to be asking me what the story was today. I just happened to see him driving by.
Yeah, well, yeah. Check out the trees the next time.
What's that?
Check out the trees. You'll be surprised.
Yeah. So there hasn't been any determination made yet?
It's in Mike Hannaford's hands. I let them know, and Costigan knows what I said.
All right.
Yeah, because it seemed like there was a policy that we had, and then that policy was, after that, one site was changed.
All right.
I'm trying to stick to the new policy, which is, not really making a decision unless we're making it together.
Okay.
So that seems to be more effective.
Dave, I guess I'll reiterate, just in general, there's been an effort between this and other sites for, I think this included Main Street, for a coordinated effort between DPW and conservation to try to make these decisions, at the same time. And I think we're working through that process.
Mm-hmm.
But so I know Chuck has gone out there and made an assessment on that one specifically, but I think it's still waiting for a response. Certainly, if you see Mr. Costigan again, it doesn't hurt to follow up with whether that's the C Quick Fix or just with the DPW email and say, just looking for a status update.
Yeah. He just, as I just happened to see him checking his mail, I stopped by and then he said, listen, I got a tea time in 15 minutes. I got to run. I'll call you later. So I didn't hear from him. He didn't call me, but if he does call me, I just wanted to, make mention that to him that I did check for him.
Yeah, I think it's up to the tree warden at this point.
Okay.
And whatever his decision is, I think we haven't finalized this draft protocol, but whatever his decision is, my understanding is we should hear about it prior to the work happening.
Okay.
Any other items?
I just have a clarification. When we are limited to no more than 3 Conservation Commission members going out at the same time, it's because of not wanting to have a quorum outside of the meetings. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So if Nicola wants to come on the site visit, she doesn't create a quorum, so we could have 4 of us go, including Nicola. Is that right?
Well, if there's 4, the old commission, back when you heard from Jamie tonight, they used to go on site visits all the time and they never posted them. That's not really
I thought we were exempt from that.
Yeah, that's not really how it works. I mean, that's convenient, but, and I'm not faulting those guys, but it's not how I've done it. It's not how I started when I was in other towns. Not the way I learned how to do it. So yeah, anytime, even when we have 4, it needs to be posted, and you're never supposed to discuss, deliberate amongst yourself about the project. You can ask questions, but don't deliberate even if it's posted. So it's only, open meeting law, you don't want to have an open meeting law infraction. That's embarrassing. So
Chuck, just from the standpoint of posting, because I think, is putting it on an agenda and getting the agenda posted ahead of time, because the agenda for our meeting is for that specific day. Does something show up specific in the conservation calendar saying conservation meeting site visit?
Yeah, or? Conservation site visit. These are the sites between whenever 8 and 11 and 5 and 7.
You've never done that since I've been here, right?
No, we have.
Done it a couple of times. We did it recently when we went to Charles Lawn Cemetery. There's enough people to do that. I mean, it's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's
No,
not.
I want to make sure we're.
Oh,
I
no,
want to make sure we're following the.
Yeah, it's how it's supposed to work. But
Yeah. Okay. Any other items?
With a motion to adjourn.
Hearing none.
Second.
All right. All those in favor,
Aye.
raise your hand, please.
all right, consensus. All right, guys. Well, thank you, and we'll see you
Thank you.
at the site visit, and then at the next meeting. Our next meeting is in 2 weeks, and we're going to do twice meetings every 2 weeks from now on.